Welcome back to How to Be a Better DM, the official podcast of Monsters.rent. I'm Justin Lewis.
And I'm Tanner Wayland.
And we are here to help you tell better stories for yourself and your players as you dungeon master sessions of D&D, Dungeons & Dragons. We'd like to give you some quick announcements. We actually have one before the show, and then after the show, if you want to stick around, we have some more announcements then as well. But first, let's talk about this. Tired of being alone? Are you tired of not having any of your players understand you? Are you tired of never truly belonging? Well, you're in luck. All you need to do is join the Guild. The Guild is a unique and exclusive experience that is only open to Dungeon Masters. It is a full community focused on helping ease your DMing burdens. Want to meet other DMs? Join the Guild. Want to discuss your homebrew ideas with people who would appreciate it instead of just telling your cat? Join the Guild. Want to find a place where all your wildest dreams will come true? Join the Guild. Go to monsters.rent/guild and sign up today for free. Wait, that can't be right. Chuck, can you check this again? Is this supposed to be... What? Oh, they're serious? It's free? Oh, okay. All right. Yes, go to monsters.rent/guild and sign up today for free, even though they are crazy for giving this away for free. Common side effects may include burping, sneezing, laughing, breathing, hearing, listening, tasting, farting, critting, sarcasm, and in extreme cases, explosive diarrhea. Awesome. With that out of the way, we can get into today's show. Welcome back, friends and listeners, to How to Be a Better DM. I'm one of your hosts, Justin Lewis, here with
Tanner Wayland.
And together we are here to help you and ourselves create better stories while you DM sessions of Dungeons & Dragons 5e. Today we are going to be talking about character creation and helping your players do that. But before we do that, how are you doing, Tanner? How's it going?
Oh man, I'm doing well. Have you ever fallen down one of those YouTube rabbit holes?
Yes.
Yeah. Today I've... So there's a whole genre of YouTube videos called where they read Reddit stories of different types on different Reddit pages.
Interesting.
And there's these one called Entitled People, and it's just it's not chicken soup for the soul. It's whatever the opposite of that, garbage food for the soul. Where so I'm a pretty patient guy.
Sure.
I don't really.
Sure.
The only person I'm impatient with is myself, typically.
I hear that.
You know?
Yeah.
And so if people are mean to me, whatever, if someone messes up an order, whatever, I'll just be like, that's fine, I'll still tip you, whatever. You know?
Right.
You know, I go with the flow.
You don't sweat the small stuff.
Yeah, these people are the exact opposite. And it's so... It's almost like living a different life, just seeing how these entitled people, Karens, if you will, not to disparage the name Karen, but that's,
Right. But to disparage Karens.
Yes. And it's just so, when they try and get somebody to help them and the person doesn't work there, or they're like, hey, I saw you helping this other person, but so you need to help me now. And then when the person just shuts them down, I'm like, oof. It's like a power trip.
Yeah.
Where I'm like...
You're like, justice,
you know?
Yeah.
And I'm also like, I would never want to be in that situation, but I'm glad that these people are getting their comeuppance.
I love that. On YouTube, total tangent, but I watch Fail Army, and every so often there's videos of people yelling at cashiers, and then as they're walking out, they run into a glass door, and everyone's like, yeah, stuff like that. That's fun.
Exactly the same thing, you know, just a little bit of karma. You see it.
Yes.
I
love the beautiful karma.
Yeah, but how are you, Justin?
I've been good. I've, as you can see next to us, this beautiful 3D printer, I got it for Christmas and my birthday, kind of a mix of both, and man, I'm addicted. It's not going right now only because it was going all yesterday, and I wanted to give it a break.
Yeah.
But I've been printing these. So I'm a big fan of using terrain on the table when you play D&D.
Yeah.
I know some people don't like it; they prefer theater of the mind. But I've been printing these, and I actually have downstairs. If you look right here, there's circles, and I figured out a way to make it inset so you can put magnets. So it's like a large...
To explain to our listeners,
Yeah.
he just showed me a little tile, square tile.
Yeah.
This one almost looks like bricks or like a white kind of brick dealio.
Right.
And man, so you just kind of put these all together. You will put these all together.
Yeah, yeah.
It'll form. You know, I actually I've seen a few different like D&D like shows or podcasts kind of use that style. Yeah.
Yeah. I really, really like it.
Nice. I also saw on I feel like it was Instagram or TikTok or something.
Definitely.
You did what is it? The Rock?
Yes, the Rocktopus.
Rocktopus, yeah.
Yes. So there's the cool thing about 3D printing, and this may or may not be interesting to you listeners, but there's like so many free stuff out there that you can just print. You can just download the files and print.
Oh yeah.
And one of them was an octopus with the head of Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, and I thought that was super funny, so I printed it for my wife, and now it's downstairs on the counter.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and if you guys want to see pictures of the D&D prints that I've done or that happened because of this show, definitely subscribe to at Geronimo Levis on Instagram, and also subscribe to our newsletter, which will tell you more about at the end of the show. But let's just dive right in with a warm-up. So Tanner had this great idea for kind of a warm-up every week. You want to explain kind of what it is?
Yeah, I was just thinking, DMs have to kind of be on their feet, whether that is dealing with a player conflict that just kind of came out of nowhere, right? Or having to describe a new setting or a new character, or, like DMs just kind of have to warm up. So for us, I thought it'd be fun, every week, switch off kind of deal.
Right.
Where we just pitch a warm-up to the other, try and stump them, or give them an opportunity to, do well, right?
I like it. Kind of like practice your skills of improvisation, but not just improvisation of like making people laugh, but like doing things that you don't necessarily have to do, or being creative in how you do it and things like that, right?
Yes,
cool.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, I hope you're ready for today's warm-up, because it's a simple one. You have to describe an orc beastmaster that your party is about to fight without using the words orc or beastmaster.
Okay.
As if in this universe, orcs don't exist, and this random one just popped up somehow.
Okay. Can I choose whatever setting?
Sure.
Okay. Cool. An orc beastmaster without the words. Okay. I'm picturing like what's it called? Colosseum.
Okay.
Right. Let's go classic Colosseum.
I like it.
So, assuming you were my player, I'd be like, okay, so you guys are standing there. The sand underneath your feet, you see the crowds around you. And there, across the way, the metal gate slowly raises as you see guards on either side winching it up. In the blinding sun, you see a foot step out. It's a large foot. It's grayish green skin. Almost looks reptilian, but it's definitely different from anything you've ever seen. As the other leg steps out, and then slowly it goes up, you see that this tall figure, is wearing a fur loincloth that looks to be of some kind of like spotted panther. And then as he comes fully into view, you see just a beast. I wasn't tough.
It's tough.
Oh man. You see a mouth with tusks and fangs snarling at you as dark eyes look out from underneath his brow. In one hand, he has a small axe, in the other, a whip. Before you can absorb anything else, he cracks the whip, and the Colosseum goes quiet. On either side of this towering figure that must be about 8 feet, maybe 9, you see pad out a leopard and a wolf, both with collars and... I was going to say spiked collars. That feels a little lame, doesn't it?
No, I think it's awesome. It looks good.
Yeah, you see a wolf and a leopard pad out, obviously at his command. This figure instead of talking, bellows and starts charging at you, axe raised, as the animals at his side charge forward. We'll just say that.
That was excellent.
We'll say that.
Well done. Audience, give Tanner a round of applause. There's
floundering.
Well, all over America right now, there's people in the gym just giving you an applause, or washing dishes giving you applause. So
you know what? I do picture all of our listeners being in the gym right now.
Exactly. Well,
Yes.
they're either in the gym or driving to work,
yes.
or trying to avoid their in-laws, or all sorts of.
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
Of course, the mid-February in-laws.
Exactly.
We
Definitely. For some reason, they're all together.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
well, I think that was an excellent warm-up, and I'm excited to see what I have to deal with next time.
Okay. I'll try and make it good.
Excellent. Well, let's get to today's primary topic, which is character creation. Excuse me. As a DM, the first step, really, after you find people to play with, is helping them create characters. And sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's hard. So we're going to talk about different methods or what we do to help our players choose characters that are really cool.
Yeah, I was thinking about this earlier, and specifically how important the DM needs to be in the early steps. Because I've seen this a few times where players, if you give them completely free and unrestrained things, then they make a character that's almost feels like they don't belong, right?
Right.
Which sucks, because you can have a party where characters are from different places.
Yeah.
They have different moralities, personalities, things like that, and yet they belong because they were created with the setting in mind. And I think that's just as a DM, you cannot just let them have free reign unless you're doing kind of a literally just combat adventure path, right?
Yeah. I think that one of the most important things you can do in helping your characters create their players' character. Helping your players create their characters is, like you said, painting the setting. And oddly enough, giving them restraints. And thinking about it, I think people will not just choose characters that don't fit, but they might struggle picking characters because they'll think, well, I have so many things I can do, but what should I do? What do I want to do? And then asking questions like we're going to talk about later really help them understand, okay, I won't like this, my party won't like this, and so forth. But one thing that I've seen a lot of professional DMs do, at least on YouTube and such, is they tend to give out kind of hot sheets for the world you're working on or you're playing in that include information such as, and actually there's a for those of you who are interested in creating your own world, there's a software out there called World Anvil, Anvil, that I've used before that actually allows you to kind of create a player guide to your world, and that outlines the races that they can choose, the classes that they can choose, things that they can't choose, stuff like that. I think that's super helpful in helping your players kind of get the gist of some of those restraints.
Yeah, and even, depending on if you're making your own setting versus, you're within an actual pre-existing or pre-written campaign, that can change it a lot, right? If you're on a more, let's say you're on an ocean adventure, right? You're going to want to emphasize that your players should, obviously, that one doesn't restrict them fully, but be like, hey, it's okay to go more aquatic just in general, right?
Water breathing might be really useful.
Exactly. It's hey, I get that we're all in love with the typical, dwarf, orc, elf, human dealio, right? But it doesn't have to be that way. And in fact, if you're with a group for a while, adding some of those boundaries can be refreshing. Yeah.
One thing that I put this, we have a list of topics that we kind of put together and things that we might talk about. But one thing I kind of want to talk about now is number 7 on the list. And it's more of a discussion because I want to hear your opinion. But do you like players knowing what other players in the group are choosing as far as character, class, and race?
I think that occasionally it is. For example, if maybe for the first campaign, no. If it's a new group,
Right.
Give everybody as much autonomy as possible so they
Right.
can discover themselves. But if you do a future campaign, different characters or something, or let's say you have two characters die at the same time, right?
Right.
It always happens,
Yeah.
Then what could happen? And in fact, as a DM, that might be a good incentive to kill two people,
Yes.
so that they can come up with them in tandem, right?
Yeah,
You
yeah.
could have like families or best friends or something, like a brother and a brother or a father and a daughter kind of deal, right?
Right.
That's why I would say not for the first campaign, but for future ones, it can add a lot of depth and like obvious
Right.
interaction,
Right.
So yeah.
See, I like that. In my last campaign that I started, I didn't tell any of the people in the group what everyone else was choosing. We ended up with 2 druids, which was really fun. And obviously, we ended up with no healers, no clerics or paladins, or I guess rangers can heal a little bit. But you know what I mean. Like,
Yes.
no one who could heal tremendously. The druids could kind of, but I thought it was really fun because the druids were able to kind of connect that way. And even though they were both druids, they were druids of different circles. So it was still variety. One was more animal shape, wild shape focused, and the other was more spellcasting focused.
Yeah.
But I now that you mention it, one of my hardest parts of starting campaigns is being like, okay, you're all in this place. This is how you meet each other, and I'm hoping you guys trust each other before long,
Yeah, and also like sometimes you want to make a setting where like, hey, at the very start, I'm going to put you in a situation where you don't know each other, but then you get to know each other, and then we'll all just have to kind of come up with reasons why you need to stay together.
Right.
While the DM gives them reasons to stay together. But then the other option is like, hey, like if you have a bigger group, maybe like 3 of them know each other, and then 2 of them know each other, and then there's a random odd man out.
Yeah.
That's certainly an option, especially as you go along. I think if you give your players just minimal amounts of preparation time, like you're trying to get this started quick, then yeah, don't worry too much about like being like, oh, let's make sure we're all have the party dynamics well.
Yeah.
Because what's the worst that happens? It's an unbalanced party. Someone dies. That's hilarious, and then you move on, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I like that.
Yeah, and so like so obviously you mentioned kind of the cheat sheet about what the world is,
Right.
and kind of maybe like what nations, what conflicts are going on. But then after that, what other kind of key how to put this? What other kind of key things do you want your players to figure out before they start?
I usually like to ask them questions.
Okay.
And essentially, there are a few big questions, but one of them is really, how does your character interact with combat? And when I say that, I don't necessarily mean are they a pacifist, but I mean because in Dungeons and Dragons there will be combat.
Yeah.
Right? How does your character participate in combat? And this lets me ask them questions like, do you want someone who punches people a bunch?
Yeah.
Do you want someone who's just really strong and gets mad at everything? Or do you want someone who kind of finesses? Do you want to cast spells? Do you want to cast a lot of spells or just like one really big one? Do you want to sneak and, kind of sussing out how they want to fight?
Okay, interesting. And as part of that, do you really, I don't know, maybe this is more just a question about your DM style.
Right.
Do you ask your players to really expand descriptively on how they do an attack? Like, is that, because I think that what you mentioned, especially in terms of having them figure out their fighting style,
Right.
Obviously it helps them in the moment, but it also, I don't know, I think it could be a great descriptive tool where like, oh, my character is just kind of like a bumbling strong guy, then they know that they need to describe it as such.
Right, right. I think that's really true. And at this point, it's it may be too soon, but I don't think it is to really start gauging what kind of players your players are going to be. Because I have in my campaign right now a couple players that are like, I do this, and they don't describe much, but they're still enjoying it, but they're kind of a lot more passive. And then I have other players who are like, and then I do this, this, this.
Yeah.
And it helps prepare you for how to interact with them. And you can definitely encourage them to do that. I found with certain people, when I try and encourage them, they do it once or twice and then don't. And then other people, they just kind of get like a little bit more bashful and they don't want to do it, you know?
Yeah, that's why I'm like, I think at the very least asking them, like you said, hey, what kind of fighting style? It makes them really think about that when creating their thing. Because there's a lot of spells you can choose. There's a lot of different kind of weapons you can choose in different ways. And so asking them to do that just helps them be a little bit more effective, which helps them have more fun. Right?
Definitely.
But how about personality, right? Like that's my question. Like, do you find that characters, like that there's certain things you can tell a player that will actually help them flesh out their character better?
Yes. And I think one thing with all of this is like the asterisk, you know, is like each person is going to participate on their own, right? Because I in preparing for this last campaign that I started like a year ago or so, I sent like a list of questions to each player. One player went and found more questions to answer. Other players didn't answer the questions.
Yes.
But I definitely like to ask people what their character wants. And I think that's a question you ask the characters like multiple times in throughout the campaign. But just like, what do you care about? Like, what does your character care about? You know, like why do they get up in the morning? Which is kind of similar questions we ask ourselves.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, it's not everybody's cup of tea, but D&D's 5th edition really started, like, emphasizing, you know, like, personality traits, flaws, ideals, bonds, which is, of course, kind of a more, I would say, more realistic way to view people rather than chaotic, you know, evil, you know, lawful good, things like that, where it's like, hey, oftentimes we aren't just good or evil. You know, if we can find out what our goals are, like you mentioned, who's important to us, because that's going to change a lot, right? People compromise their morals or are better for certain than their typical morals for people that they care about, right?
Exactly. That's really insightful, actually.
Yeah. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah. So that's like one piece of advice I'd give DMs is, hey, if you're having a hard time, really like genuinely getting your players, then it's like you go back to the simple thing. Give them a list and be like, okay, write down your bonds / relationships, your flaws, you know, just do like at least a couple, couple 3, and then your ideals, and then from there, make sure that the player doesn't forget them. Right? By like anytime they make a decision, be like, oh, so this is big because typically your ideals are this. Well, why would, you know, and then they have to explain it. And that leads to character development, right?
And I think during character creation is a good time to write down yourself the flaws, bonds, personality traits, and ideals of your characters, so that way you can refer to them and be like, oh, little Timmy cares about money because money means that little Timmy doesn't go hungry. You know what I mean?
Yep. Yeah, exactly. You know, it for the DM, aside from character creation and helping their players do that, it can help you play the million different characters that you end up playing, right?
Definitely.
Yeah, I mean, other than that, any other things on character creation that really stick out to you?
I think one important question is, how did your, well, two, and they can be the same question essentially, but they can be different. One, how did your character acquire their skills / magical abilities? And 2, what made your character start adventuring? So, and this is important, audience, because in the world we live in, the adventurers, quote unquote adventurers, would be considered, you know, your professional MMA fighters or your Navy SEALs or your Mount Everest climbers, or your Joe Rogans. They're not your average people. Your average people are NPCs, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's something in your character's life that pushed them out the front door. If we're using the allegory of Bilbo Baggins, he was in his comfy little hobbit hole, and then a party of 12 dwarves came and presented him a contract, and that pushed him out the door to adventure.
Mm-hmm.
So asking the question of why did your character start adventuring, and how did they acquire their skills and or magical powers, I think really helps paint the picture of their backstory.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you'll see this with most quality literature or comics or whatever. Like, okay, I went through a period where I was really into online manga and comics.
Love it.
And basically they have so freaking many that are about being in kind of like a D&D-esque world, right? Mm-hmm. Where you have adventurers, guilds or whatever. That's a whole genre. And the better ones of those, I just, while I'm binging certain kinds of media, I start to notice after the haze is gone that I'm like, oh, this is what works with the good ones, and then the bad ones don't do, And what I noticed was a lot of times when you had that kind of same magical, typical world, dwarves, elves, humans, whatever, when they took the time to explain the main character's reason why they ended up in that adventurers guild or whatever, it's just that much more interesting. And it doesn't have to be crazy, especially if you have newer players. You could be like, hey, what changed that made that so they couldn't settle for their comfortable life, right? If they came from some school of witchcraft and wizardry, not Harry Potter, obviously, not. But if they came from that, it's why did they leave school to go adventuring? That kind of seems like a downgrade, you know?
Yeah.
Or it's oh, they were about to inherit the family farm. Why didn't they?
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Shoot, brain fart. Fetch. What was I going to say? I just totally derailed us.
You're fine.
And if your players, at least this is my opinion, if your players are struggling to come up with those quintessential memories that your character should have, this pillar memory of I am so-and-so because I chose to sign the contract, leave Hobbiton, and travel with the dwarves. That's a pivotal memory for Bilbo. I say you can play out some of those memories with the player in a sort of a session 0 and be like, hey, so you're a warlock, right? And let's play out how you met your patron. So you are walking in the woods and you get jumped by some bandits and now you're left for dead. What do you do? And kind of help them play through that, because they'll remember that, and then it'll actually kind of be a backstory for them because, they played it.
Yeah, exactly. That's a great example. Also asking for and this would even be kind of a fun little improv or not, prepared or no.
Right.
You could be okay, tell us, verbally describe a montage of this person's,
Yes.
just key scenes,
Yeah.
Sometimes some DMs really try and go into it by doing flashbacks later on or dreams, just kind of pop in there. But having the player be firm on that first before the DM is, then I think that's important.
Yes. Getting players to describe how their characters look has always been super hard for me. And I think probably it's because I've never actually put into practice during character creation the method of what does your character look like besides the brown hair, blue eyes thing,
Yes.
I've never actually sat down and said okay, you have this kind of armor, which generally looks like this. What color is your armor? Or, things like that.
Or even, getting to the meat and bones, being okay, tell me their most distinguishing features and give me at least 3 or something.
Yes.
You know?
See.
Because if they just have, I think most players will just, so long as we ask them at the start, like session 1 or whatever, to describe who they are, and be like, oh, who do we see or something, right? Then they usually will talk about their hair. They'll talk about like, oh, it looks like he's got a hood, so maybe a wizard, which is like, okay, that's not great. But instead, if
profiling,
you're like, right? It's like, he's got a hood, so maybe criminal, maybe call the police.
Right.
But instead, being like, okay, give me like 3 distinguishing features that people notice when they see you.
Yeah.
Then I think that gives them a lot of freedom, right?
Yeah. One thing in my group, one of the players is kind of an artist. Like, he likes drawing, and so he actually drew his character, part of his character. I guess his character's like self-portrait.
Yeah.
Which was really cool to be able to be like, oh, that's what he looks like. That's how he styles himself. And I guess if you do know artists, you can ask them to do stuff like that. Or if you want to pay for it, you could have your characters or your players pay for it. But I don't know if I would recommend that, because like, it can get expensive the more campaigns you do.
Absolutely right. And most often I think people can find some kind of stock image lookalike.
Yes.
Another way to do it, I've seen some groups do this, I've seen some groups on podcasts do this, is where they have a celebrity lookalike.
Oh, that's fun.
Where they're like, okay, this person looks like Chris Hemsworth, except it's an orc, so like Chris Hemsworth with like, tusks and like, green skin, obviously, and instead of the like nice blonde hair, just like a blonde mohawk.
Oh, that's fun.
So like, that's another way, right? You can always do kind of that. Hey, it looks like this, except picture it with a bow. Just kidding,
Right. I think that's funny. And now that I'm thinking about it, one thing that could really help you, have you ever heard of Hero Forge?
Yes, I have.
Yeah, so like, listeners, Hero Forge, and they don't pay us for this, so, or at least not yet, hopefully, someday. But anyways, Hero Forge is a software online. You just go to heroforge.com, and you can basically create custom miniatures. And nice thing is, you don't have to pay for it. You can just kind of play around until you find out what it looks like. And I'm pretty sure there's a feature on there that you can have them paint your mini if you order it. So there must be some sort of way to color the minis online and say, hey, this is what I want. And so maybe play around on Hero Forge with your players and say, what do you want your character to look like? And that should help you as a DM as well as the player figure out, okay, they have a backpack on and it has this many pouches. Well, not that granular, but like, it tends to have a lot of pouches. And so you can actually help from that. You can extrapolate the other senses that comes along with them. So if they're really stinky, you can see that they're stinky, and you can describe that. If they have a lot of stuff, then they're going to make a lot of noise and things like that.
Yeah. When you said stinky at first, I was like, as stinky as in bad? But I was like, no, he's actually just talking about stinky.
Stinky.
Straight up stinky.
Just stinky. So.
Yeah, but I mean, I think that like, we're not going to get to all of character creation.
Sure.
We when we were talking about this topic, we were like, this could not be covered in one thing, right? Because like, this isn't even just like, first part, this is just like, hey, what do you talk about with your characters? What do you share with them? What do you expect from them?
Yes.
I mean, after that, there's a lot of things that they need to actually do, and they'll do a lot of bouncing ideas off of you.
Yes.
But after that, I think that we can definitely talk about that another time, right?
Excellent. So, any finishing thoughts for today's primary topic?
Finishing thought should be, well, mine would just be, hey, if you want to have an exciting session every time, you need your players to be excited about their characters, right?
Yeah.
That should be the end all be all, right? They should think that their character is the bee's knees. And hopefully not just because they're, a munchkin who just is super, OP or anything.
Yeah.
Right? Like, they're like, oh, no, this person isn't, like, a two-dimensional. They do have, like, a worthwhile goal. Even if they're, like, a kind of, like, like, more awful character, they can still be someone that's admirable in some way.
Right.
And the player should feel that.
Yeah, definitely. characters are the foundation of a good D&D campaign. So helping your players create amazing characters is how you have sessions that are amazing, because in most sessions, they're not going to be like, well, what does my character want? They're going to be like, wow, my character isn't feeling this right now. And so hopefully they'll voice that to the group and create some sort of conflict, and that'll drive the story along. So characters are foundational.
Yeah. Well, hey, thank you so much for having me today.
Yeah, thank you for coming back again. Listeners, if you've listened this far, thank you, first of all. And second of all, that means you are probably interested in what we have to offer, which is great, because I actually want to take a second right now and really talk about kind of the purpose of this podcast and who's it for. And in simple terms, if I can put out a definition, you can agree or change it if you want. I think, like we say at the beginning of the show, it's for dungeon masters who want to create better stories without having to pay tons and tons of money. I think that's key, because after all, it's a hobby, it's a game, and hopefully it's being used to help bring people together and make people's lives better. So that's kind of what I want this show to be going forward, and kind of that focus of just dungeon masters who don't want to pay thousands of dollars to have fun with their friends, you know?
Yeah, and even going along with that, DMing is very similar to most other passion projects or hobbies.
Yeah.
If you get too bogged down in either the minutia or the scale of the thing you're trying to do, or you compare yourself to some of the amazing, entertainers out there who like do D&D or something, right? Where they've got the sets, they've got all the time in the world because they get paid to do it.
Right.
Like you're just gonna crush your hopes down into oblivion where you don't actually start, right?
Yeah.
And that's not the goal here. The goal here is like, hey, so long as you're listening to the podcast, then that means that you're thinking about these things, which means that when you're actually preparing for a setting, for a campaign, and when you're in the midst of that campaign, you're going to be adding, session by session on top of like how you DM. Right?
Agreed. And again, thank you, listeners, for listening to the very end. Assuming that you are still listening, I want to invite you guys to sign up for the newsletter, which is where you can get extra content as well as little behind-the-scenes pictures of us chatting and figure out what we actually look like in real life. You can sign up for that newsletter in the show notes, and there you can actually sign up as well to do a one-shot with me as your DM. And then once we do that, we'll probably put out a link for doing a one-shot with Tanner as your DM, if he's up for that. To make him up for that,
of course,
send some messages to @Geronimo and just say how much you want Tanner to be your DM, and then we'll get him there. Also, we are working on putting together a TikTok, so keep an eye out for that, as well as various social medias. But thank you guys for listening to today's amazing episode, because Tanner Whalen was here, and that's why it was amazing.
Oh, sure, that's it. 100%. Yeah. No, but genuinely very happy to be here, and I hope that you guys listen next time.
Excellent. And until then, let's go ahead and roll initiative.
Thank you for listening to today's show. We really appreciate your support and your patronage. We have a few more announcements to go over. First,
did you ever fall in love with the library as a kid? It was a place where you could experience 1,000 stories without having to buy 1,000 books. That is what Monsters.rent can do for your D&D campaign. You can rent and swap out as many quality miniature monsters and creatures for your D&D party as you could ever want, without having to buy them. You can rescue villagers from a kobold camp, or lead your party through the fighting forest, or many more adventures. We're coming out with new bundles all the time. Just sign up for our subscription to get access to your own personal library of minis. Go to monsters.rent to find out more. That's the website. Monsters, with an S, .rent. Get your library pass to a world of minis today.
we also wanted to let you know that today's episode is sponsored by Stardust and Dragons. I'm going to let one of the cast of Stardust and Dragons, Christian Hatcher, and his crew tell you a little bit more about it.
This August, A new adventure podcast is coming to a platform near you, filled with action,
You one of the two of them. We can't keep taking hits like that.
drama,
Everything that she's been doing, everything she's going to do, finally sets in.
and stardust.
Help! Help! Someone, please!
Find out more about this epic odyssey at stardustanddragons.com, where adventure awaits in the stars.
That's all the announcements we have today. Again, thank you so much for everything you do for us. You make this show possible. Like we said before, we'll be back next week with another great episode, and until then, let's go ahead and roll initiative.